Welcome back, everybody. This week, we're jumping back into our Budget Ink series to take a look at Pelikan 4001 Brilliant Red. Now, unlike a lot of the other brilliant colors in the 4001 series, normally what you hear is what you get. Red is supposed to be red, blue is blue, green is green, and all that good stuff. In this case, this is probably one of the more temperamental inks that I've seen in the 4001 series as a whole. I mean, like right now, it looks like it's coming out a decent red ink. But when I took this ink to one of my pen meets a couple weeks ago, that wasn't the case. In fact, everyone at the table said the same thing. This is a pink ink. And then we took out Diamine Oxblood and all was right with the world. But let's go ahead and jump in so you can make up your own mind about whether or not this is Brilliant Red or should be renamed to Brilliant Pink, which they actually do have pink, but it only comes in cartridge form. Now, as is the case with all the other Pelikan 4001 bottles, I really do like the look and shape of this bottle. It's got a nice vintage feel. Plastic cap, yes, unlike the metal caps of the Edelstein bottles, but overall, it's a good 30ml bottle. And you've got to admit, Pelikan could cheap out and go with a complete plastic bottle, but they're giving you a glass bottle. Yes, it's got a plastic cap, but hey, at least it still includes the single chick finial design that you see on their fountain pens. And at $10 a bottle, having a glass bottle is actually really good. The plastic bottles and I don't get along, and I've broken quite a few of them from other brands. But let's quit talking bottles and start talking writing. And for that, we're going to be doing the writing sample with my Newton Majestic with a Franklin Christoph Extra Fine Flex Nib. You can already see on the nib, we've got a little bit of ink staining. From the nib, it actually comes off in water. From everything else, you're going to be soaking it for quite a long time. See that yellow crusting on the fins here? That is from this ink. You don't really even see that yellow sheen come through that much unless you dump this ink on the page. So seeing it stuck to the fins on your pen and then having to take hours to clean that out later, it's actually kind of a strike against this ink. But let's go ahead and get to the paper. And on paper, right off the bat, this ink is in your face. You can see from the splotch here that on the lighter shades, we're getting kind of a Tassia Momo look, but on the deeper parts, it's kind of red, going into that yellowish, greenish sheen that you see on the fins, but only when you dump it on the paper. But overall, I'm not seeing brilliant red. I'm seeing a very brilliant pink, or an intense pink, but just not brilliant red. Let's go ahead and take a look at shading and dry time, though. And on the shading, we do at least get to see some of the transition from the pink to the red. From 1 to about 3, you really see the transition, then it kind of levels off on 4 and 5. So not as much dynamic range as I would hope, but for a budget ink, not a bad dynamic range overall. And on the dry time, we're actually getting a really good result as well. It's drying about, honestly, I'd say 25 seconds. I lost track of time between 20 and 30 seconds, so I believe it was 30 seconds completely dry, but realistically, I'd peg it at 25 seconds. So even though I wrote 30 up there, it's a good 20 to 25 second ink, and that's a good performance for a budget ink. Now, looking at the part that matters, this is how the ink performs out of a pen. So like I was saying, I did this writing sample with the Extra Fine Flex Nib from Franklin Christoph, so we're getting a little bit more flow than we normally would from a finer and extra fine, but not by much. So you can see out of the nib, we're not getting as much dynamic range, and we're not getting that really light pink. So it is actually coming out a little bit more red, but not the red that I was kind of expecting. And maybe that's a sign that I need to recalibrate, but when I hear brilliant red, maybe I'm actually thinking more along these lines where it's more of an intense red, almost a burgundy, which this would be Diamine Burgundy Royale. So reds aside, naming conventions aside, let's go ahead and take a look at the water sample. And for the water sample, we're back to our old friend, Rhodia Dot Pad. So here we go for about a 30-second on-camera soak, which is probably going to be about 2 to 3 minutes in real life. So this result is actually falling more in line with the rest of the 4001 series of inks. I think there's 1 or 2 of them that don't hold up well to water, but at least this one, after a 3-minute soak, we're actually looking at something that's really recoverable. Yeah, the paper may be ruined, but at least you'll be able to transfer what you wrote into another notebook and keep it with you. And when it comes to water, that's what matters most. Now, that brings us around to the final thoughts though, and like I said at the beginning of the video, here I'm kind of conflicted. On one hand, I wish the color was a little bit more red. Maybe a little bit more along the lines of oxblood or burgundy, something in that range. When I hear brilliant, that's kind of what I think, and maybe that's just, like I said, a matter of me needing to recalibrate my expectations. As far as the overall performance though, we've got a good dry time, we've actually got really good shading performance and dynamic range, and the water resistance is pretty good, especially for a budget ink. So overall for the 4001 series, this ink is a good fit. And if you really do enjoy this color, then get the ink. You're gonna like having it in your collection. But one word of warning, and for me, this is probably the biggest drawback of this ink. In my experience, I found that it has the potential to stain, and that is definitely something to be looking out for. I'm not going to be putting this ink in my M600 white turquoise, because it may actually stain that body, and that's not something I like to see from a fountain pen ink. But your mileage may vary. So that's going to do it for this video. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Consider supporting the channel over at patreon.com. Follow the channel on Twitter and Instagram. And I'll see you guys next week.